This week on the podcast, we're talking about Easter eggs. They're something that we're seeing a lot of these days, especially thanks to stuff such as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hidden little details, secret cameos, and even some end credit scenes all sort of fall into this category. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today here on YouTube and on Spotify. So be sure to subscribe, follow, all that goodness. And with that out of the way, let's get right into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Behind the Screen podcast. I'm John Aljets, and joining me once again this week is everybody's favorite Scandinavian, Esh.
Everybody's favorite, huh? Whatever happens to Pewt. Whatever happens to PewDiePie.
We're not going to talk about him. And this week we're talking about Easter eggs, hidden details, cameos, end credit scenes, all that fun stuff that you just love scanning every single frame of a movie to try to catch.
Yeah, like I call it nerd candy.
Yeah, normal people do that, right? It isn't just us. Like, normal people will load up a movie into Adobe Premiere and literally sit there and go frame by frame. Like, that's normal
Normal
behavior.
people absolutely look up the same movie on TV tropes 30 seconds after ending it, right?
Okay,
that's
cool.
not just me.
I did just want to check that this is normal behavior and not
Absolutely.
something that huge nerds do, because I'm not one of those.
Absolutely not. No. Anyway, Easter eggs, yes.
Yes.
This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I think so. So let's start this off with, just kind of going over like what is an Easter egg, because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. But if you're not someone who does live that nerd lifestyle that we were just joking about, you might not necessarily know what it is. I mean, to most people, an Easter egg is one of those colored eggs that they look for that one early morning in April or whenever Easter comes around. But Easter egg, the term, is actually referring to hidden little things that are not necessarily like major plot points or anything like that. Like, these are usually like little fun gags that are hidden in a movie or game or TV show or whatever it is that you're viewing, that are literally just there for like a little reward for very attentive viewers.
Or just for those that are like in the know in some way or another.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Easter eggs that aren't really hidden, but that only a select people among the audience will get.
Yeah.
So there's that too. Like, yeah, we know you know. Let's move on here.
Yeah. Sort of like,
Stuff like
like the Pixar movies, which we'll get to talking about. They always
Absolutely.
have Easter eggs in their movies, be it the very recognizable, you'll see that ball in pretty much every Pixar movie, or they'll often put in something from an upcoming movie into...
Yeah, they did that a lot.
Yeah, like, what was the name of the bear in Toy Story 3?
Oh, Lotso. Lotso, the hugging bear, I believe.
Lotso Lovin' stuff or something like that.
Something like that.
That bear appears in Up. You can see him in the corner of a frame.
They just love new toys now, don't they?
And that's one of those Easter eggs where it's like, we threw this in here and no one's going to notice until the next movie comes out.
Nobody's going to notice for like 3 years.
Yeah, pretty much. But, so let's get into a little bit of the history of Easter eggs. Now, Easter eggs are honestly something that's actually probably been in entertainment since entertainment was a thing.
Most likely.
But the first recorded example of an Easter egg actually doesn't come from movies, it comes from video games. Back in the 70s, it wasn't common for developers to get credit for their work on games. Like, it just wasn't something that was done in the industry. It especially wasn't done at Atari, which actually had a policy where they didn't credit the developers. But while one of them was working on 1979's Adventure for the Atari 2600, this developer actually put in a secret where if the player was standing on the exact right pixel at the exact right moment and did the exact right thing, it would take them to a hidden room that had the programmer's name written on the ground. Now, you would think, like, okay, Atari having a policy of like, we don't credit our developers, would see this and freak out. And initially they did. Just a little bit. There was talk about recalling the game to remove it and all this sort of stuff. But ultimately what they decided to do was they started to encourage their developers to add in such little secrets and used it as kind of a marketing tactic, sort of like a guerrilla style thing to get people to want to buy games so that they could like spend time trying to find these secrets.
Yeah, play them more and get even more excited.
Yeah. And that's largely like, that was the first time that it was referred to as an Easter egg. Of course, you know, drawing comparison to the hunt for those colored, dyed poultry products.
Chocolatey treats.
Yeah.
But there is actually a little bit of an addendum to that, because this might be the first time the term was coined, you know, like this is when we start calling them Easter eggs, but there's actually a very literal case of Easter eggs in movies before that.
Hit me with it.
In 1975. I don't know how many listening to this are musical fans, but Rocky Horror Picture Show.
It's a good one.
A wonderful movie starring Tim Curry based on a stage production. An awesome musical. You've probably heard Time Warp at least once in your life. It's almost impossible to avoid.
I feel like that's one of those movies where, like, even if you aren't interested in musicals, you have to watch it at least once.
Oh, absolutely. It's wonderful. Anyway, there's a ton of fun little details in that movie. But one of the coolest ones is that there are actually literal Easter eggs in some frames, like hidden under chairs and stuff, because the crew had a literal Easter egg hunt during filming and never found all of them.
I see you shiver with anticipation.
So there is actually a game in some viewings of the movie where people will like scream if they see the Easter egg. So we have literal Easter eggs 5 years before the term Easter egg was a thing.
That's almost like an
four or five.
accidental Easter egg.
It is, but it's still funny though. I'm saying, yeah, it's not really an Easter egg in the sense that we've discussed so far, but it's a literal Easter egg in movies. I had to bring it up.
It's an Easter egg in the sense of like the Starbucks cup in Game of Thrones was an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, whoops, we didn't mean for this to be in frame, but we're just
It's technically more of a goof, but it has become an Easter egg over time because people have made a game out of it now.
And as you said,
so I just thought it was too funny not to bring up that there's a literal Easter egg hunt in one movie.
Yeah, and I mean, like the other side of the coin, you know, we're kind of looping cameos and end credit scenes and that sort of thing into this. And cameos is something where, like, you know, we've had examples of bigger name actors coming in to do bit parts in films literally since the beginning of film, like ever since that was a thing.
I mean, some movies use that as a marketing tactic.
Oh yeah, and I mean, like,
this is more of a cheap grindhouse thing, but in the 70s and 80s in particular, they'd be like starring Bruce Campbell, and then he showed up for 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so cameos, little hints, even foreshadowing. A couple of the examples you sent to me were more like foreshadowing than real Easter eggs.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like
we're doing broad strokes.
I feel like these days, foreshadowing, you know, because Marvel has started, you know, obviously they started the trend of end credit scenes. But Marvel has sort of started this trend of using Easter eggs or hidden little things to hint at potential future projects.
Right.
It's just sort of the way that it's sort of almost like its own subtype of Easter eggs now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I have a couple others I'll bring up as we get there.
Yeah.
But that's the basic history of it. Like, just a little fun thing that you can spot in movies if you're a little more attentive or a little more in the know.
Yeah. All right, so Easter eggs that people might have missed. We're gonna fire through some, and I'm gonna throw some out, and I want you to tell me if you had caught that, and then I want you to throw some out at me, and I'll do the same.
Oh, I can assure you that most of the time I don't, because when I'm watching a movie, I'm watching the movie. I'm not usually like looking for details. See, sometimes I do catch them, especially in superhero movies, because I read a lot of comics.
Yeah.
So
see, working, you know, with Screen Rant, we do a lot of things you missed videos.
Oh, really? Do you now? I never noticed.
And I'm often one of the people who's doing that. So there was a string, like back when we were still able to go to movie theaters. There was a string of times where I would go to the theater, you know, to go watch a preview showing of a movie, and I'd be sitting there with a notepad writing down stuff that I caught. So I got really, really good at catching little details.
Right.
But one that is from a slightly older film that not a lot of people, and when I say slightly older, I mean like we're talking about Fight Club. It's not that old.
Right.
At least I feel like it's not that old. It was made before maybe some of our listeners were alive.
Probably.
But so you think about Fight Club, and you think about this very like anti-consumerist like kind of message about it. So then it kind of like flies in the whole face of that the director David Fincher purposely hid Starbucks cups in nearly every scene of that movie. If you're paying close,
that's-
if you're paying close attention in pretty much every single scene, I think there's only like a handful of them where it's not the case. There is a Starbucks cup somewhere in the shot.
Yeah, either people holding it or it's on a shelf in the background or something
Yeah,
like
on
that.
a
I've seen couple
table,
of the
something like
pictures.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you might catch one or two and think like, oh yeah, this is the people in the world that really like Starbucks. No, it's in every scene. As I said, with the exception of like 2.
I find that one extra hilarious because that's clearly a case of Fincher being cheeky.
Yeah. I don't think that was product placement.
It wasn't. Well, maybe it was. Who really knows? But I think it's basically Fincher saying, okay, my movie is anti-consumerist, but consumerism is so prevalent that I can't escape it either.
Well, and maybe he's also saying something about the fact that a lot of times those like hardcore anti-consumerist people are also the kind of people who drink a Starbucks coffee every single day.
Oh, probably. Like, yeah. I mean, that's a classic. Like, down with capitalism. Said the radical from his iPhone.
Yeah.
You know. Let's not discuss the opinions on that.
Yeah,
so much.
no.
I just think it's Fincher being a little cheeky boy and just be like, hey, check this out.
Maybe that goof in Game of Thrones wasn't actually a goof. They were just paying homage.
They're yeah, a Fight Club homage in the middle of Game of Thrones.
They were just like, hey, we're big Fight Club fans. So like they got away with putting Starbucks cups in every shot. So, you know, we're
but they also
do it.
did that before. They also did that before every nerd had a video editing software.
This is true. All right, you got one for me?
I got plenty.
All right, hit me with one. Just give me one.
All right, just a random one?
Yeah.
How about, since we're going to be talking about a lot of superhero movies anyway, there's a real cool one in Captain America Winter Soldier.
Ooh.
Which, of course, stars our lovely Samuel L. Jackson. We all love him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most people have watched most MCU movies at this point, but
I would hope so.
Fury ends up faking his death to go off the grid, and there's actually a scene where he's visiting his own grave.
Yeah.
And if you pay close attention to the inscription on that grave, it quotes a particular Bible verse. More specifically, the same one that Samuel L. Jackson famously quotes in Pulp Fiction.
A Bible verse, by the way, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, it's still there. It's still a reference to that
Yeah.
exact phrase. But yeah, that is a made-up phrase.
Yeah, I believe the tombstone says the path of the righteous man, and then it like
Yeah,
trails
something
off.
like that. I don't remember it specifically,
Yeah.
but it's one of his. I mean, that's probably his most famous scene in general, so it's not so strange. But there's no reason to do that. That's what makes it an Easter egg. There's no good reason to put that on the tombstone other than be like, hey, we know who this guy is.
Yeah, it's a little different than a lot of Marvel Easter eggs that are like a reference to, you know, a Marvel character or some.
Oh, there
some
are
part
hundreds of
Marvel
those. I
universe.
assure you.
This is
Basically any Marvel movie. Basically any Marvel movie you watch. If they mention a name in passing, there's a 90% guarantee that that's a Marvel superhero or villain before they become a villain.
Oh, yeah.
Every single person's name is most likely the civilian identity of some major character, or it's someone in their supporting cast.
yeah, it's
Like,
it's
not
someone
one
who's
person.
popped up on the page somewhere.
Even that guy that Peter talks to real quick in Spider-Man Homecoming is the Prowler, who is the uncle of Miles Morales, who later
Yeah.
becomes another Spider-Man. You'll see how it goes.
Of course, talking about Donald Glover in that case.
Yeah.
But this is one of those times where Marvel decided to reference something outside of their own universe. So let's move on to a non-MCU Easter egg on this one.
Yeah.
This one coming from The Departed. Fantastic movie. Just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely magnificent. But spoiler alert for this movie, a lot of people die. Like, a lot. In fact, pretty much everybody in the main cast, with the exception of Marky Mark himself, bite
Right.
it at some point. So, you know, Matt Damon bites it, Leo bites it, everybody bites it. Just people are dropping like flies. But if you're watching that movie really closely, you might notice that every single character who dies, before they die, are seen in a shot where there is an X somewhere in the frame.
Like they're being crossed off a list.
Yeah.
It's pretty clever, actually.
The easiest to spot one that most people will point to is actually when Matt Damon gets taken out. Before he walks into the room where he gets taken out, the carpet has a pattern that creates an X. So, yeah, just a little bit of visual foreshadowing for who's gonna bite it.
I kind of want to use that one to segue to two others.
Okay.
Because
Hit me with it.
Because there's another movie that very heavily foreshadows death with one particular thing in each shot, and that would be The Godfather.
That's a great movie too.
Where basically every character that dies at some point interacts with or is in a shot with oranges.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's a bowl of oranges on a table, or they're holding one, or there's an orange slice in their drink, something like that. It's all sorts of ways, there's always an orange, which is an odd choice.
Yeah.
Like, I understand the X, but what the heck's up with the oranges?
Yeah, I feel like there's some like symbolism there that I'm just
probably.
not privy to.
There's some fruit symbolism,
Or-
like apples mean innocence.
Or maybe
whatever.
Francis Ford Coppola just really hates oranges, and so he wants them to be recognized as a ill omen.
That might be it.
That might be
but
it.
it's also funny, this whole spotting someone who's about to die, because I can name a franchise where that's kind of a plot point, looking for background details to figure out when people die and how. And that would be the Final Destination films.
Oh yeah.
Because I think the third movie, they literally take pictures of people, and then somewhere in the photo, there's a reference to how they're gonna die. Like, there's a glare that goes over a guy's throat, and he gets beheaded later. Something like that. The first one does have a few Easter eggs of its own, because it's from that age, right after Scream, which, deconstructed the slasher genre and horror movies for teenagers in general.
Yeah.
That was its whole point. That movie in itself has a ton of slasher movie Easter eggs.
Yeah, I was gonna say we could sit here and just talk about the Scream franchise just in general.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of them get straight up name dropped, like Prom Night, and who the heck watching Scream in 1996 knows what Prom Night is?
I mean,
the movie. So
People who are big
that's
fans of Jamie Lee.
probably. Prom Night is actually fairly good. I
yeah,
like that
I
one.
enjoy it.
Anyway, my point is, Final Destination came out a couple years later.
Yes.
And it's still in that vein of like very hip and trendy and self-aware horror movies.
Yeah.
Or at least really trying to be. To the point where basically every major character is named after a horror movie director, effects person, or actor.
Yeah.
The most obvious one is Sean William Scott in that movie, who I believe is named Billy Hitchcock.
Yeah. That's
So that one is very easy. very easy to pick
That's
up.
pretty on the nose.
But there's also several characters named Browning, which would be Browning, Dracula and
Yeah.
such. And there's also one called Blake Dreyer from Carl T.H. Dreyer, which, by the way, is a Danish director.
Even I wouldn't have caught that one.
Yeah, that one is a little more tricky, but it's on purpose, I assure you. They all have names
I'm a
like
big
this.
horror fan, and that's obscure even for me.
I mean, to be fair, we're going way back now.
Yeah.
We're going way back to before Universal started doing stuff. So we're very, very far back.
So let's move on from horror movies, but let's talk about something that is still pretty actually like kind of horrific when you just think about it. Although depending on your opinions of the character, you might be like, all right. So the movie Hercules, right? The Disney movie Hercules.
Yes.
This one's pretty well known, but there are some people out there who might not have caught it. At one point, Hercules is having like he's being painted for like a portrait, or I think they're painting him on the side of a
this
vase.
is after he becomes big and famous.
Yeah.
It's right after Zero to Hero, I believe.
Yeah, and he is sitting there and he's wearing a lion's pelt. Well, that lion is actually Scar from Lion King.
That is a cool little detail.
It's a little morbid,
Especially since
but
the Lion King has a joke at one point where Zazu tells Mufasa that maybe you should use him as a rug.
yeah, he wasn't quite a rug. He was just like a cloak.
It's really funny though. I do like that one. Disney has a lot more of these than you'd think.
Yeah.
Actually, both in Pixar and elsewhere. But Pixar in particular, in especially Toy Story, is just full of references to stuff and other little Easter eggs.
Yeah, but keeping it on the Disney trend, Mary Poppins Returns. Did you ever see
Right.
that new Mary Poppins?
No, I have not seen Returns. I haven't heard great things.
Allow me to be the dissenting opinion then. I actually quite liked it. But then again,
Okay.
I am also one of those people who I'm a pretty big fan of Emily Blunt, and I'll watch pretty much anything that she does because I just think she's a great actress. And so I thought that what she brought to the character worked for me. But that movie has some cameos from original cast members of Mary Poppins.
Right.
Obviously, there's Dick Van Dyke who gets a musical number in the movie, which
I mean, you don't get Dick Van Dyke in a musical without giving him a number.
there is definitely something about watching like a 90-year-old man tap dance on a desk. It's great. But he's not the only original cast member in the film. The original Jane, the little girl, she's in the movie. And she's actually if I remember correctly, she's on the street when the new Jane, she's out like talking to the street sweepers, and the original Jane is there. So that's a cool little nod to the old
That's
cast.
very cool. That's a fairly common type of Easter egg where if they're making a remake or a distant sequel, they'll get some of the originals.
Yeah, and
that happened in the Black Christmas remake, for example. I don't remember
Okay.
the name of the specific actress, but it happened there
which
too.
Black Christmas remake? Because remember,
The first one,
there
the
are
2006 one. Yeah, the 2006 one.
Okay, the decent.
They
one.
had a
Sorry, Jason Blum, but your Black Christmas remake didn't work for me, or for most people.
That's what I hear. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Blumhouse and everything that they crank out. Just not that movie.
They can be very interesting, for certain.
But or like, you know, and sometimes they draw attention to it. Sometimes they don't. The one that comes to mind where they did draw attention to it was the movie Starsky and Hutch with Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson. Was it Owen Wilson?
Yeah.
Am I thinking?
I think it was. I haven't seen Starsky and Hutch, but also that whole franchise isn't that well known where I'm from. So
yeah. Well, at the very end, because Starsky's car got wrecked in the movie, and so at the very end, as like a celebratory thing, Hutch buys him like basically the exact same car, and he's like, here, you've got a new car, and they bought it from the original Starsky and Hutch actors.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
See, I like things like that where you like pay homage to who came before.
Yeah.
That's actually a thing if we go back to superheroes, because I feel like superheroes is a genre that lends itself especially well to Easter eggs because it's so expansive and there are so many characters.
Yeah, there's so much history that you can pull from to just like throw in little things.
If I can go off on a tangent here for a sec, superheroes are sort of like, it's still one of the newest genres we have.
Yeah.
It's only, and I'm saying that in quotation marks, about 90 years old from the moment you can start codifying it with Superman's arrival.
Which, I mean, in terms of human history, that's not very long.
It's a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
But that's like still a new genre. But there were so many people creating so many characters. And even now, where we have two major universes, there are X amount of writers working at all times doing whatever they do and introducing X amount of new characters all the time or bringing old ones back. So I feel like that's just a genre that lends itself well to it.
Oh, yeah.
But my point was, since we were talking about bringing the old guys back, the Flash TV series from CW in the Arrowverse has a really cool one. Because a major plot point in the first season is that Barry Allen, who is the Flash, the fastest man alive, is trying to clear his father's name because he's been framed for killing his wife when Barry was a child.
Yeah.
And the actor who plays him is actually John Wesley Shipp, who played Barry Allen in the 1990s live-action Flash series.
That's right.
So that's a cool one. And that's not the only one, because Mark Hamill is brought in on the Arrowverse again to once again play the Trickster, just as he did in the 90s series. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And like
stuff like that. And that franchise, by the way, the Arrowverse is full of this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Saving people in a flash.
So let's move away from superheroes a little bit here, and let's move into a little bit into the real world.
Oh.
So, do you remember the movie The Rocker?
No, I don't.
Yeah, nobody remembers that movie. I pretty regularly will stream Clone Hero. You've watched me a few times on Twitch. And there's a song from that movie that I play in that game. And I remember I played it one time, and Owen, who's been on the podcast a few times, was in my chat and was like, oh, hey, The Rocker, that movie that literally only John remembers. But so the movie is basically, it stars Rainn Wilson, Emma Stone, and a bunch of other people who, I think Josh Gad's in it.
Right.
Basically, this movie came out in 2008. Yeah. And basically the premise of the movie is that Rainn Wilson was a drummer in a band called Vesuvius, and right when they were like just starting to get big, like they were getting signed and everything like that, the record label was like, hey, we'll sign you, but you need to replace the drummer because we don't like that guy.
Right.
And so Rainn Wilson gets kicked out, and then he goes on to like start a band with his, I think it's like his nephew and some of their friends, and they wind up becoming a big deal. And it's this whole thing. Well, the premise of that movie actually sounds pretty similar to an actual historical person that is from a band that I guarantee you everybody listening to this has heard, but they probably have not heard of this guy. So in the 60s, there was obviously the Beatles. Huge band. Huge. I was always more of a Stones kind of guy, but that's just me. But anyways, you know, they had their drummer Ringo Starr. Everyone knows Ringo. Ringo Starr was not their first drummer.
Nope.
There was a guy by the name of Pete Best, who was actually the original drummer for the Beatles, who was kicked out shortly before they became famous.
That has to sting.
Yeah, in pretty much the exact same way that it happened to Rainn Wilson in the movie, which makes it very appropriate that Pete Best has a cameo in The Rocker, where at one point Rainn Wilson's character had just been fired from his job, and he's sitting at a bus stop, and the guy who he's sitting next to is Pete Best. So that's a lovely little
That's
thing.
really cool.
Little bit of it.
At least I'm glad to hear Pete Best has a sense of humor about
A
it.
little bit of a happy ending for Pete Best, though, because later on in the Beatles' life, they would release some of their early recordings on an album.
Oh.
And some of those early recordings had Pete Best on drums. So he wound up getting royalties from the Beatles.
Oh, that's
so
good.
he
That's
He
nice.
wasn't completely left out of it, although you kind of got to feel bad for the guy being like right on the verge of history and then being forced
I mean,
to
that's
sit
that's
out.
just. Oh man, jeez.
So, okay, now we got to get into a little bit of a heavier discussion, and by heavier, I mean like we're going to talk industry a little bit.
Right,
So, because of the prevalence of Marvel, throwing in Easter eggs that are, direct references to what's coming in the future, we're starting to see moviegoers starting to pay more attention to Easter eggs and credit scenes, all that sort of stuff. And so it's almost starting to shift the way that movies are being made, with more and more Easter eggs being shoved into movies.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts about the way that this is affecting films as a whole?
I mean, I believe we should mention that mid or end credit scenes aren't new. They have happened before, but it's definitely gone to a whole different level now.
Yeah, it's significantly more common these days.
Oh, yes. And that's because the Marvel MCU became such a big deal as it was. What's important to remember is that originally, that first end credit scene in Iron Man wasn't really meant to kick off a huge interconnected franchise.
No, it was just kind of like a fun thing that they threw in there that they're like, this
It
would
was
be cool.
absolutely meant to. It was absolutely meant to kick off a franchise because it was the first Marvel Studios movie.
Yeah.
But back then, I believe it was 2008, that was just, we're gonna make Marvel movies now. Marvel has their own studio and they're gonna make movies. It wasn't meant to go much further than that.
No.
But then it took off.
Yeah.
Then they realized how well people responded to it. They realized that the fan base that already exists eat this stuff like candy.
Yeah, because they just suddenly went, oh crap, we mentioned the Avengers in that end credit scene, and now everyone's
Now we
losing
have to
it.
make it.
Now we have to make it.
So it's no coincidence that the next ones in line were Thor and Captain America.
It's also worth pointing out that, you look at the MCU now and you're like, oh, wow, that was a really well thought out, sort of thing. But it's worth remembering that Phase 1 was basically done flying by the seat of their pants.
More or
They
less.
didn't have a plan for after the Avengers. It was Joss Whedon who was like, hey, let's have Thanos pop up at the end.
Yeah. And even then, yes, there is build up to the Avengers, but that doesn't start happening until Thor, which was one of the last ones.
You had...
Or was Captain America the last one?
Captain America was the last one before Avengers, but you would argue that...
And it had the Tesseract.
I mean, you could argue that the build-up actually started...
It's been a while, so...
It actually started with Iron Man 2, because... There was Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, the Avengers. Because some people don't know this, but The Incredible Hulk actually didn't originally have an after credit scene. It just wasn't going to. But then while they were filming Iron Man 2, they were like, hey, we've got Robert Downey. Let's just have him go shoot this real quick thing to reference the Avengers again. That's why it feels really weird at the end of that movie to have Tony Stark of all people come to talk to Ross about the Avengers Initiative, when it's when Iron Man 2, it's made very clear that he hasn't even really been selected for the Avengers Initiative yet.
I just wanted to bring up that this wasn't planned, but it has become this huge thing.
After the Avengers, they were like, okay, we got to buckle down and we got to get a story team and we got to figure out where we're going.
And then what happened is the MCU becomes a thing, and everyone starts wanting to make universes. We have the MonsterVerse, which is being worked on right now, which seems to be going all right. Godzilla and King Kong.
Godzilla King of the Monsters wasn't great, so maybe when 1/3 of your movies aren't great, maybe
I meant more.
Maybe that kind of.
I meant more in terms of trying to set it up. That part is going.
And at
all
least
right. They're actually
at least
connecting
they've
them fairly
managed
well.
to get to 3 films. Dark Universe.
I was about to say, I have not met one person who ever thought the Dark Universe would take off.
I
Not
really
one.
wanted it to. I really, really, really wanted the Dark Universe to take off. Just
would've
for the
been great.
sheer fact that I remember they were talking about the movies that they had planned, and one of them was a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie.
Yeah, I know you're
I
a fan.
love the Creature from the Black Lagoon. And it does not get enough love. The last time that we got a direct reference
doesn't.
to Creature from the Black Lagoon was Monster Squad.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's a good one.
I do have the Dark Universe does have a little bit of hope still because Blumhouse, I don't know if a lot of people know this, Blumhouse bought the rights to everything that they had for the Dark Universe.
And they did make
the Invisible Man
recently.
was originally supposed to be Dark Universe. And so like that movie came out and it did well enough. And so like what are the chances the Blumhouse will look at that and go, all right, we're not going to be as blatant with it as Universal was.
The chance is very, very high. It's Blumhouse, of course.
But like,
they will.
what's stopping them from the next? I think they were talking about doing. What were they? Were they going to do a Dracula film or were they going to do a Frankenstein film?
I have no idea.
They have another Universal style monster movie coming out. And what's to stop them from just very, very subtly connecting it?
But see, that's how you do it. You do it subtly. I've had this discussion many times. DC and Warner Bros. It's not that there isn't material to make a universe. It's not that all their build-up was bad necessarily, but it was rushed like crazy. They were way more focused on making a universe than they were on actually making superhero movies that function. My point is that the MCU took off so hard, so fast, so suddenly that every studio, I think, were just like, well, now we gotta start making franchises before they become franchises. Yeah. Everybody tries to hit the ground running with a franchise now. Sequels are being announced before a show airs. Or a movie airs.
Yeah.
New seasons are being ordered before TV shows air. And in some cases, that's just great. More goodies for me, But it also just kind of, to me, means that we're at risk even more than usual of forgetting to make movies.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, and it's affecting a lot of things.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a movie with some of my friends, and as the credits start to roll, they will turn to me and be like, hey, is there an after credits thing? Because they assume that because I work for Screen Rant that I'll know. And a lot of times I'm just like, I don't know. Like, what, do you think I pay attention to that?
It's only, again, quotation marks, been going for a decade, but they're already making fun of it. People are already not getting tired of it, but already seeing the pattern.
Yeah, Homecoming.
So I'm not sure it'll survive. Yeah, I'm not sure it'll survive that long. Even Deadpool, which was in 2016, wasn't it? Was that when it came out? That one, it's only, okay, so when I watched that, a friend of mine made a bet. He bet that there wouldn't be an end credit scene because it was so connected to its own. I was like, there will be one, I assure you.
Yeah, and it winds up being the Ferris Bueller, like, it's over.
Yeah, exactly. Which,
go home.
Yeah, and that's line for line, by the way. It's barely a parody. It's just a remake of that. And he was so angry because he said it didn't count as a scene. But
I mean, like, not to interrupt your point here, but remember how like kind of disappointed people were when Endgame didn't have an end credit scene?
Yeah,
it just had the sound of the clinking of metal of Iron Man making his suit in the cave.
Yeah, that was a tearjerker for certain. But my point is, it's already so prevalent that they made fun of it halfway through the cycle we're in. So I do think it'll slow down eventually, considerably too. But right now, it definitely means that everyone is just scrambling to franchise before they have any legs.
And you're seeing it with movies that even like maybe don't deserve to do it. I'm not gonna like talk crap to the Sonic the Hedgehog movie here. I liked it. I thought that it was pretty good. But some people didn't know it.
Also full of Easter eggs, by the way.
But some people don't know that movie had an end credit scene. Tails showed up.
Yes, to many people's delight, including me.
Did that movie necessarily need to have that? Did that need to be there? Could that have just been the opening scene of the second Sonic movie?
Probably, but also, if you didn't expect Sonic to plan a sequel before it starts, you're lying to yourself.
That's fair.
Because Sonic is a huge, huge franchise already. It's confusing. Its fans keep fighting over literally everything under the sun. But it's been around for nearly 30 years now? And there's such a wide cast of characters that people love.
That's true.
So I think we can argue about whether or not it deserves it or whether or not that should have been saved for the second one. But of all the examples you could give, I feel like that one makes the most sense. Because there is absolutely grounds for more movies introducing more of these characters.
I guess fair.
That's just me, maybe.
But the point is that we are seeing a lot of uses of Easter eggs, hidden little details.
Also just to appeal to fans because they've realized that nerds eat this stuff up.
Not only as like sort of, the pseudo marketing tactics like we talked about with Atari back in the day, but also they're using it to create larger franchises even when it's not necessarily earned yet.
And like it's also influencing the experience because people will look at me during Marvel movies to see if my face shows a reaction to
Just
a
like,
name.
was that a reference? Was that a...
Yeah, exactly. I get that all the time from people who don't watch it as much, and I don't mind, but it's also very noticeable.
Do you find that it's outside of your friends just looking at you for a reference? Do you find that it is affecting the way that the movie-going experience for you?
Not quite. I honestly enjoy these, especially now that we're halfway through it, and like I said, half of them are just extra jokes at this point. So that much I can appreciate. I already think it's slowing down a little with building up more, at least in the MCU itself. Most of them are just gags or, a running gag. My personal favorite was the Captain America PSA in Homecoming. That one killed me. So, let's talk about patience. I actually did like a singular loud ha when that happened, to the point where my friend who was with me flew up his seat in shock.
I don't think you were the only one.
I love that. But yeah, no, I don't think it has affected my viewing experience other than people stay seated when the credits start.
I do know that for a while there, theaters were rather upset. Because
they couldn't get people out to clean.
Because like normally they would start cleaning during the credits so that they could get to the next.
Right.
But now like everyone's staying through the credits and they're like, we can't sweep while there are people there. So
that is a problem. I don't think it's affecting the actual experience of watching the movie. But I do think it has had an effect on how movies and especially franchises are being made. I don't think Ready Player One would have been made like 5 years ago, for instance. Which is Easter egg the movie, maybe not 5, but 10.
Although I feel like bringing Ready Player One into this discussion kind of just takes us back to our previous episode where we're talking about nostalgia baiting.
And we did bring it up. I'm pretty sure
because I feel like that is it's more guilty of nostalgia baiting than it is like just rampant Easter egg usage.
But this reliance on Easter eggs and on getting people to catch things and show up for the next bit of a franchise, I feel like that has definitely fed it.
The use of member berries, as it were.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
But I feel like I'd have to agree with you there. Although I don't know if I can 100% like say in all honesty that it hasn't affected your average moviegoer, because I'm not your average moviegoer.
Neither am I.
Because again, it's literally like my job to watch for those sort of things. But so for me, it's affected it. But again, I'm not your typical moviegoer, because I am now hyper alert in movies.
I also still see people leave during the credits, even in movies that are famous for having them.
That drives me a little crazy. Like when I'm watching a Marvel movie, if you get up when the credits start to roll, I like want to reach out and just go, no, don't go. It'll be worth it, maybe, hopefully, I swear.
If you're a nerd like me,
which a lot of times when you see those people get up to leave, you can kind of tell that like, oh, they're probably not like the biggest nerds. These sort of things, Easter eggs, hidden details, cameos, all that sort of stuff, has definitely had an effect on Hollywood and how movies are made. And it largely can be chalked up to just general nerd culture. Not going to say it's a bad thing. Not going to say it's a good thing.
It isn't.
It just is what it is. And it's the kind of thing that I honestly, we might see end credit scenes start to taper off. We might not see as many of those in the future, but I don't think we're going to see Easter eggs or, hidden details going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh, they're never going away. People have always enjoyed
And I mean,
stuff.
judging by the views that we get on our Things You Missed videos, people love it. So I don't think that, they aren't going anywhere anytime soon. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys that sort of thing, awesome. If you're the kind of person who doesn't really care, just sit tight, I guess, because you're going to have to deal with it for a while. You have to deal with a lot of screaming nerds going, oh, did you catch when this thing appeared in that thing that this is connected to this? I don't know why I'm doing that voice.
Well, again, they've always done that. That's always happened. It's just bigger
It's more
now.
Noticeable. It's more in your face.
It's had an effect, but I don't think it's as drastic as certain other things like the nostalgia bait.
Which it's a whole other discussion that we previously had.
Yes. Exactly.
But anyways, there is nothing else to it but to do it. Esh, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on YouTube. I have a channel there called Fiction Addiction, where I just basically poke fun of weird media I like. Not necessarily bad media, by the way, but movies, games, comic books that I think are worth talking about. I'll poke a little fun of those. You can also find me on Twitter, where it's ESH_Figuredect. And I'm on Twitch under Eshbal, ESHBAAL, where I try to stream twice a week. But that's where you can mainly find me. You can also find me on Instagram with the same @ by the way, ESH_Figuredect, where I put up my drawings. I draw a lot of fan art.
And it's all fantastic stuff.
Huge
Huge fan of his work. I have one of his works as a poster. It is currently hanging near me. You can also find me on the wider internet under Bender Waffles, BenderWaffles. I'm on YouTube where I teach game development. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram under that same name. Get on Twitter to see my hot takes about the We Bare Bears movie that I just watched. I said on Twitter, it was the best movie that I've seen all year, which is not necessarily a statement about the movie, but a statement about the state of movies this year.
I need to get on that franchise. I haven't watched it in a while.
I love
Either
We
way,
Bare Bears.
yeah.
It's great.
It's lovely.
But anyways,
It's lovely.
guys and gals, if you enjoyed listening to this, you can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, all that wonderful stuff. But until the next episode, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.
Patient.
So what do you guys think? What are some of your favorite Easter eggs, hidden details, cameos, end credit scenes, all that stuff? Be sure to let us know down in the comments below. Also, be sure to subscribe to Screen Rant on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there.